Welcome to Forum 360 with its global outlook and local view. I'm Ardith Keck. We are talking today about the Akron Zoo. There are lots of things happening at the Akron Zoo. With me are Elena Bell, who is Director of Marketing and Events, and Allison Shell, who is a zookeeper with an animal that we'll learn more about. Elena, the zoo has dinosaurs.
We do. So this is the very first time we've ever had dinosaurs, and Dino Trek runs through September 14th. We have 20 life-size animatronic dinosaurs that are spread throughout the zoo, which is a little different than you might see other zoos do. They're not in one location. And what's really cool is our dinosaurs are included with general admission and free for our Akron Zoo members.
Oh, free for us. Okay. You said animatronic. Does that mean move? They move?
Yeah, so 17 out of the 20 dinosaurs do move. So we have 15 different species at the zoo, and there are a couple babies that go with, so like our T-Rex has a baby with her, so that's where we get up to 20 dinosaurs.
Ah, are they scary?
They are not scary. They are friendly dinosaurs, but we do understand that it might be a little overwhelming for some people to visit with the movement and the noise of the dinosaurs. So we have a few times throughout the summer that you can visit when they are off, and these are called our soothing hours, and you can find those dates on our website at akronzoo.org.
Tell us again how many there are.
There are 20 life-size dinosaurs.
Ah. And where do these dinosaurs come from?
So we work with a company that goes around to different zoos and other locations with these dinosaurs. So they are world travelers.
Aha, okay. Allison, please tell us about the creature you brought.
Yeah, so I brought a really special animal friend today. This is Lewis, and Lewis is a type of lizard. He's called a prehensile-tailed skink. So skinks are part of the largest family of lizards, and you can tell I'm talking about him, right? He's starting to kind of perk up a little bit. And they have some really unique adaptations, and because they're such a large family, there's lots of different kinds of them that might look really different. So the prehensile-tailed skink is the largest of the skinks, so he's pretty long. So you see the tip of his nose, and he goes all the way down to the tip of his tail here. And he's showing off how that tail is prehensile because it's gripping. It can wrap around and hold on. He's also got these long toes that you can see here that help him to be really good at climbing. They're a species of lizard found high up in the trees.
What does Lewis eat?
He is an herbivore, so he eats a very healthy salad every day. So he gets fruits, vegetables, and greens. And so he has a diet that makes living up in the trees really great for him, right? It's basically a whole buffet of food. And these are animals that can even eat plants that would be toxic to other animals. And so that allows them to really diversify their diet as well. Now, even though he is an herbivore and he doesn't need to rip and pull at meat, he does have a pretty strong bite. So in my lap, I've got some heavy-duty gloves that just help me when I'm handling him. Also, these nails he has here are really sharp too. And so all really great adaptations both to defend himself and help himself get around up in the trees.
Mm-hmm. And so whatever tree he picks, he can eat the leaves.
Right, exactly. So these guys are very specialized. They're only found on the Solomon Islands. So this is a group of islands that are going to be found northeast of Australia. So if you think of New Guinea, they're just a little bit to the east of that. And they're found in the old growth forests there. So they're found in a pretty small area of the world. So they're a really neat species to be able to teach people about. They probably haven't heard of them or seen them before. And they're a species that's really worthy of our conservation efforts too.
Okay, I'm going to ask you more about the conservation efforts. Mm-hmm. How did the zoo get Lewis?
Yeah, so Lewis came to us from another zoo. So he's part of what's called a species survival program or plan. And this is a really neat way that we're able to keep track of our animals and keep track of their genetics. So Lewis is a male, but with this species, it can sometimes be really difficult to tell the males from the females. They look very similar. So we actually needed our vets to come in and do a special procedure to find out if he was a male or a female. And then all of that information gets put into a database, and someone looks over all of that, looks at where they came from, looks at their genetic history, and can find good matches for them if they would be a candidate for a breeding or mating situation. So Lewis has lived at the Akron Zoo since 2009, and he was actually born in 2004. So he's going to be 21 this fall. So he's getting up there in age. These are animals that we typically talk about their lifespan being about 15 years, but they can live up into their 30s. So hopefully we've got a nice long time with Lewis, unless he would get a recommendation to move to another zoo.
Huh. Is he happy at the zoo?
I hope so. So I've worked with Lewis for a long time, and he, like I said, has been at the Akron Zoo since 2009. So working with these animals, especially in an ambassador setting where you're bringing them out of the zoo and taking them to new situations, being able to watch their behavior is a really important part of my job. So seeing him here being very calm, watching that calm, gentle breathing, seeing him just kind of looking around are all good cues to me that he's very comfortable here. He has an enrichment plan back at the zoo, so offering him new things in his house, giving him new experiences, offering him new types of food or new presentations of food, giving him different ways to experience his world are all ways that we hope we are giving him what we would call good welfare, but also might explain as him hopefully having a happy life with us at the Akron Zoo.
Good. And you can tell that he likes coming out to programs like this?
Yeah, so like I said, we just are going to be watching his behavior. So if we see him kind of stiffen up, or we see him start to be darty, we see him maybe not wanting to come out of his house, or things like that are all cues that maybe we need to change up how we present him or do something different for him to help to improve his life at the zoo. But for the most part, he does a really wonderful job coming out for our programming.
Okay. He seems very relaxed.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what he would be doing if he was in his native habitat, right? So he's an animal that was born and has lived in zoos for his entire life. But if he was an animal that was in his native habitat of the Solomon Islands, he would be up a little higher, right? But he would be perched just like this. They're typically what we call a crepuscular animal. So that's a word that you don't hear as often as you hear nocturnal or diurnal, but it's a word that we use for animals that are going to be more active during twilight times and when the sun's coming up and when the sun's going down. But they are sometimes more active at night. So when we see this really just calm kind of perching behavior, this is going to be very similar to what he would be doing in his native habitat. But he doesn't have to worry about predators, right? So he's very well protected living at the Akron Zoo. He doesn't have to worry about big birds of prey or snakes or rats or anything like that. He also gets food delivered every day. So while we do unique presentations of his food to help him to explore and have to look around for food the same way he'd have to in his native habitat, he doesn't have to worry about the tree he lives in getting cut down or losing a food source or something like that.
But he would have his tail up onto a branch.
Right, he would probably have it wrapped around a branch, exactly. So that tail is so useful. So it's helpful in a lot of ways. So he might be able to wrap it around a branch. It might just even help him with balancing. So as he can move it around, it's going to help him as well. And so this tail is really important. So unlike some other species of skinks that might drop or lose their tail, he's going to hold on to this tail for his whole life. So there's different advantages and disadvantages to that, right? This tail takes a lot of energy to build and is really important for him. But some other smaller skink species, they might actually have a tail that's brightly colored to attract attention to that. So a predator would go after that tail. They're able to drop that tail and run off in another direction, and then they'll just regrow that tail. So lots of really cool adaptations.
Right. Well, Lewis, I hope you stay happy here.
Me too.
Elena, the zoo plans to build a new addition. What is it?
Yeah, so we have just recently broken ground on a new hospital for our animals. So we have a current hospital, it's 30 years old, and when we built it back in the 90s, we had maybe 100 animals. Well, now we're at more than 2,000 animals, and we provide day-to-day care for every single animal, no matter if they're big or small, furry or scaly like Lewis here. And so they need very specialized care. So we are building a new state-of-the-art hospital to help us provide that care for all of our animals.
Does the zoo have veterinarians on staff?
We do. We have a fully staffed veterinary team that comprises of 2 veterinarians and then multiple vet techs. And then we also have some zookeepers that are specialized to care for just our animals that are in the hospital.
Okay, and how often do the animals get examined by the vets?
So it depends on the different species. So maybe if we have an elderly animal, they're going to maybe get checked out more often than they're not. Whereas sometimes our big dangerous animals, they might get an exam every year, every other year, because it does take a lot to put them under anesthesia to do that full exam. Now, a lot of our animals, which is really cool, they are actually trained to participate in their own health care. And so they are trained to do different behaviors like open their mouth so the keepers can see their teeth, present their nails so they can make sure that's all okay. And then they also will show their stomach. That's actually a very vulnerable space for an animal, so they're going to be more likely to hide that. And if they're sick, they really aren't going to try to show that. So our keepers have all of them trained. Some of our animals are even trained to, if they're like an animal ambassador, they can let the vets listen to their heart with a stethoscope. They maybe are voluntarily trained to get injections so they can get their vaccines and we won't have to put them under anesthesia. Some of them are even able to, like some of our lions are able to have their tails come out and they can do a voluntary blood draw. So we do a lot of care for our animals, and anytime that we can avoid anesthesia, we will do that.
Okay, my next question is, how do you examine a grizzly bear?
So if you need to do a full exam, we do put them under anesthesia to do that full exam. But like I said, both Cheyenne and Jackson, our grizzly bears, are trained to do some really cool different behaviors. For example, they not only are trained to get voluntary injections, but they give it to themselves. So the keepers will hold up the needles and then give the cue, and then they lean on the needle. So they are choosing to have that vaccine. They have such great trust with their keepers and our vet team that they're able to do that. And again, a really great example of having those different trained behaviors. Jackson, our male grizzly bear, actually broke off one of his nails once when he was digging. And so they were able to monitor the regrowth of that nail and make sure it didn't get infected, all without having to put him under anesthesia.
Oh, wow, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. That the wolves can be trained too?
So the wolves are a little bit different. We are completely hands-off with our red wolves. They're the most critically endangered canine species in the entire world. There are less than 20 estimated to be in their native habitat, which is just a small protective range down in North Carolina. And so we actually work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife on a program called the Red Wolf Recovery Program. And back in 2021, we had 8 pups born at the Akron Zoo, and we were able to take 4 of those pups down to North Carolina when they were just a week old. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife took those 4 pups to a den of a mom who had just given birth herself. And when she went out to hunt, they put those pups in the den, made sure they smelled like her. And when she came back, she adopted them and raised them. And we have actually had confirmation that 2 of those 4 pups have reached adulthood and have gotten a tracking collar. And one of those 2 females has had pups of her own. So we've been able to contribute to the population of this critically endangered species. And so we manage that species a little differently because of that potential.
Yeah. Well, now you're mentioning endangered species. Are all of the animals endangered?
Not every single animal at the Akron Zoo is endangered, but they all play a role in our ecology system. So they might be vulnerable to extinction, or they might not be. So for example, grizzly bears. Grizzly bears are not endangered, nor are they vulnerable to being endangered. But they are struggling in which moms are getting euthanized or killed and so leaving their cubs orphaned, which is how we got our 2 grizzly bears, Jackson and Cheyenne. Their mom was what was called a nuisance bear. She learned that people means food because people were feeding her. So she kept coming into town. She'd get relocated, but she would find her way back into town. So after the 3rd time, U.S. Fish and Wildlife did have to euthanize her, and then they discovered she had 2 young cubs that were unable to be to survive on their own. So thankfully we had a spot for them. We were able to take them in, and then they can share that story of why it's really important not to feed wildlife and stuff. So while grizzly bears are not endangered, they still have a very important role at the zoo to teach people about orphan cubs and why you shouldn't feed wildlife and things like that.
They're brother and sister.
They are brother and sister.
That's
and they
neat.
act like brother and sister too. So they're quite hilarious and definitely one of the more popular animals that you'll find at the Akron Zoo.
You have to climb a hill to get to them.
You do have to climb a hill. I recommend going through Wild Asia to get up the hill. It's a little less steep.
Aha, okay. And does it, let's see, do animals get regular injections?
It depends. So they do have their annual vaccines that they would need, but maybe if an animal is not feeling well and needs some medication, they might get more regular injections like that.
How do you know if an animal is sick?
So that is what, like Allison mentioned, she has a really good relationship with Lewis. She knows him. She knows his behaviors. So those keepers have those strong trusts built up with their animals, and so they're going to notice, hey, so-and-so's not acting normal. Maybe we should get the vets up here to check something out, and they're able to monitor them that way.
And what's the philosophy behind keeping animals in a zoo?
So every day we are connecting our guests' lives to wildlife, and they're going to have an incredible moment of coming face to face with a lion, and they're going to take that experience back and be like, well, how can I protect lions? What can I do to help keep lions around for years? And so while we are helping our guests have those connections and learning moments, we're also on the other side of the field so we are working with species survival plans to establish a genetically diverse population of these endangered species in the zoo. And then we're also working with field conservation organizations to help resolve the reason why are these animals endangered and how can we resolve that.
My guests today are with the Akron Zoo, Elena Bell, who is Director of Marketing and Events, and Allison Shell, who is a zookeeper, with Lewis, who is moving.
Yes, he is. And have you seen his tongue stick out at all?
Yes.
So his tongue has been sticking out, so he's kind of what we call tasting the air or smelling. So he is really just checking out his environment. And so we see him kind of crawling and moving around a little bit, moving his head side to side and sticking that tongue out are all ways that he's able to interact with and learn more about the environment that he's in.
So the tongue sticking out is not because he's uncomfortable.
Right, exactly. Yep, it's actually showing us that he is really kind of interacting and exploring his environment, which is really good.
That's cool. I thought maybe he was ready to stop being on air.
Yeah, no, he's doing a really good job. So he's a really good climber. So if you do notice, Lewis is missing a couple of his toes. That was something that happened before he came to live with us at the Akron Zoo. But even with some of those missing digits, he still does a really amazing job getting around. Prehensile-tailed skinks have some really great adaptations that help them to get around. So you can see those long toes that he has on his back feet. And on the underside of his feet as well, it almost kind of looks like a cobblestone pathway. They're really textured, so that gives him a lot of surface area and good friction for holding on. And then you also might be able to see, I'll turn him around this way, and you can see how that long tail has kind of curled around here. So that prehensile or grasping tail helps him to be able to hold on, so that helps him to be able to better explore his environment as well and give him really good balance, since a lot of times what he would be doing would be climbing up like this if he's making his way up a tree.
He's very disturbed by being moved around.
So he is just doing what he needs to do to keep himself stable and comfortable on here. So we do a lot of enrichment for our animals and giving them opportunities to explore. So giving him things like this cork bark to explore on, giving him climbing structures and things like that are all really good. They're good for his brain and they're good for his body as well, to help to challenge him and give him some new experiences.
Well, he's getting some new experience.
Exactly.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Are all zoos operating under the same philosophy?
So if they are a zoo that is accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, like the Akron Zoo is, yes, they are held to the same standards and philosophies. So there's about 250 accredited facilities throughout the world. The majority of them are here in the United States. And we're held to higher standards by AZA than we are even the federal government. So they will accredit us every 5 years, and they look at not only our animals and our animal welfare and our veterinarian practices, but they also look at our facilities and our guest services and all of that. And so they look deep dive into our zoo, and actually our most recent accreditation, which is back in 2021, we did get a perfect report, and we were one of only 3 zoos to ever get that perfect score.
Wonderful. Good for you. Years ago, animals were kept in cages, and I remember when we came to Akron many years ago, the Akron Zoo actually had animals in cages. No longer.
No, so that has changed. All of the standards that each animal has, they're reviewed constantly, and so we look at having natural habitats rather than cages. That is a very old school zoo mindset, and the Akron Zoo has actually renovated our entire park. That our oldest area was built in 2005. Because we are constantly reviewing those standards and how can we make things better and just like their natural environment for our animals.
Penguins, are they one of the most favorites of people?
They are a very popular animal at the Akron Zoo. They're right at the front, right when you walk in, and they're very interactive. They love to see our guests. They love to play with our guests, so they are definitely a favorite.
Okay. That was one of my questions, that people see the penguins first, and they do like to interact.
Yes, so they're very popular.
And what are some of the other favorites?
I would say our red pandas are definitely a popular one. Red pandas, just as a species, are a very popular animal. And then a lot of our bigger animals, like our tigers, our river otter is a very popular, and she's very interactive with our guests. And we also, the habitat that we have a slide that goes down through the otter habitat, and that is a big hit with the kids.
Yeah.
And also a big hit with our otters. They love it when it opens up for the spring and kids are going down the slide again. They love to swim around the clear tube and interact and play with people. So they're also a very popular one. Our lions are also pretty popular as well.
The animals that are behind plexiglass, do they really like having an audience?
So they adapt. They know when people can see them. Some of them really like to interact with our guests, and others, they have the choice, like, I don't really want to sit by this window right now. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go have some privacy. Some of them also, like for temperature regulations, are snow leopards. They have the choice to go inside in the air conditioning in the summer because obviously they're not built for a hot Ohio summer. They prefer our Ohio winters. So they have the choice. I'm going to have some private time now. I'm going to go inside and cool down.
Okay. Well, we have explored the Akron Zoo, and I think we have lots of animals there. 2,000?
More than 2,000. So if you think about it, like our bats, we've got hundreds of bats in there. So we just count that as one. So we have more than 2,000, but if you think about it, just the bats habitat is just one.
Okay. And you have lots of birds and a bird sanctuary.
Yeah, we have an aviary of North American songbirds, which I know a lot of people are like, well, we can see these in our backyard. Why do we need to come to the zoo? Well, a lot of people don't realize that those birds are endangered. So we're telling the story of these birds in our own backyard are endangered and the crisis that they're facing and how people can help protect these birds.
Okay. Well, Lewis, we're almost finished, which I think is probably a good idea because Lewis is moving around.
Yeah, he's just kind of, I think, getting a little more comfortable and kind of checking everything out. Doing, again, lots of that tongue smelling and just kind of checking everything out in the studio.
Elena and Allison and Lewis, we thank you for joining us and give us more facts about the Akron Zoo. This is Ardith Keck for Forum 360 and its global outlook and local view.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.